Welcome to this week's program, and I do apologise for the quality of the sound. It's me, not the equipment, I can assure you. That horrible dreaded lurgy that's been travelling around New Zealand stopped for quite some time at my house. But anyway, moving on. We're going to be talking, funnily enough, about human health and the fact that if you can get away for a holiday, we're going to give you some ideas on where you can go without spending another mortgage. We're also going to be talking about a fair bit about commerce when we have John Wally on board, and Brent Rawson will be here to talk about how motor racing can help exports. But in just a moment, it's farm accounting. Kerry, it's the time of year when we look at bank covenants.
Yeah, it is. We've got our farmers bringing in the end of year books, or about to. And of course, under your bank covenants, you've got to have certain ratios you've got to meet. And if you don't meet them, then the bank can review your lending. And worst case scenario, they could actually pull the lending out if they weren't that happy. So
you're basically juggling slightly, massaging perhaps to let the bank know?
Yeah, we'll do the books, and then it's a case of saying, right, what are the covenants? So it could be that you've got to make sure you've got enough profit to cover your interest 2 or 3 times. Or it could be that you've got to be within certain debt ratios. So we look at those and look at the results and see what impact they are. And if they're not met, and we know that the bank's a little bit scratchy because of the last season, we'll actually go ahead and sort of see if we can manipulate and put things into other periods, legally move things around, revalue things if need be.
The key word there was legally do it.
Yes, within the legislation there's a few mechanisms we can use. They're not normally used because you don't usually have these sort of things happening, like low dairy price, the drought, etc. But the last couple of years you've got to start thinking about it. So one example we've been doing recently is, if the farmer's got a huge fertiliser spend and it means they're potentially going to breach the covenant, we're saying, right, let's take it out of this year and move it into a future financial year. And it's perfectly legitimate, the legislation's there to do it. All you've got to do is basically notify IRD in writing that you're doing it.
That's interesting because, funnily enough, next season they probably won't be using much fertiliser because they won't have the cash flow to do so.
Exactly, so what we're doing is basically spreading those expenses out, so there's not a big hit in 1 year. We can spread it out over 2-3 years, whatever we want to do, sort of thing. And it means that you can meet the bank covenants, but also you're not getting a huge loss in 1 year, you're sort of spreading that out over, hopefully, when things start picking up a wee bit as well.
That's interesting that when you do that sort of thing, that you are working with IRD and saying, this is what we're doing, and IRD are comfortable with that.
Yeah, I recently went to a seminar where there's an IRD representative, and I was talking to him during the tea break, and he actually encouraged us to do a lot more of it. He said, look, we know the farmers are out there struggling. Let's see if we can both work together. We don't want to see them suffer, and we want to see them carry on. And he was giving us 3 or 4 other ideas that they're potentially coming up with for us. So it's quite cooperative out there with them at the moment.
It is going to be tough for banks because banks are looking at debt loads.
Yes, they are, and that's where these covenants and the percentages, etc., become absolutely crucial. In previous years, we haven't had to report them to the banks. I've got a couple of clients where the bank are actually saying, right, we want you to work those out for us and tell us what they are, and then we'll have a look at whether you're within them and sort of go from there. So the first step really is we're telling farmers to find out what the covenants are, because sometimes they just sign an agreement and get the money and carry on. They don't actually find out what the requirements are. Let us know as their accountant, and then we can make sure that they stick within them and the bank's also happy. And
where does cash flow come into this? Because you're talking about what's already been spent, aren't you?
Yeah, we're not talking about spending anything to meet the covenants or anything like that. It's just what's happened in the past and how we can make sure those results meet what is required of that bank.
Because it used to be a stage when you'd say, for goodness sake, start spending now because it's the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking at a huge tax bill, we'd say, look, start looking at your repairs and maintenance, that sort of thing. Now we're at the other end of the scale where we're looking at saying, right, you spend all this money, how can we get the best value in terms of the bank, etc., out of it for you?
Kerry, the other thing is low milk prices. I know we've been on it again, but what's the latest? What's the latest
Fonterra
advice?
have come out and they've got a guaranteed milk price scheme. It's been around 2 or 3 years, and we've got dairy farmers looking at it. And of course they're asking us the question, should they be in or out of it? Basically how it works is you lock a certain percentage of production and at a guaranteed price for the season, and that's what you get. If the price is going down and you've locked it in a sort of a higher price, you win. If the price starts coming back up during the season, you could potentially lose. So we're saying to our dairy farmers, look, there's no standard answer. We've got to sit down with each one of you and look at your farm, look at what your risk profile is. Some are prepared to take a huge risk that the price is not going to come up again, and so they'll grab it. But it does vary from farm to farm. And even if an owner's got 2 or 3 farms, they all could be doing different things.
So that's what I would call a futures market.
It basically is, yeah. You're taking a gamble that this season's going to be within the price range that Fonterra are offering, and it's not going to go above it.
It must be good for for the A, the accountants, and B, the bankers, because they've got a guaranteed income.
Oh yeah, it gives you certainty. So you can say, right, we know this production is going to get this price, and so you can start sort of budgeting around that and have your fixed costs covered by that milk production. But if the price starts going up, that's when your bank will get a bit nervous, because all of a sudden you're not getting the full value. You know, you're getting that price and that's it. There's no sort of movement on that price. So
somebody who is sitting on a dairy farm at the moment, thinking about that price, you haven't told me what it is, but it's fine. They need to sit down with their banker and with you and a fortune teller. Yeah, basically they do, yeah. They should be going into the accountant and sitting down and say, look, what's the price range that Fonterra are offering? How does that work for my farm? What does it mean? Looking at what their production's going to be, they've got to work that out first, and then come in and then we'll have a look and see whether it's worthwhile doing it or not. Talk to 2 or 3 other people about what they're doing. Talk to your bank and see what they forecast the price is going to be in the next season, and go from there. Because that's, once again, I'm not being negative, but you don't know what your production is going to be because they're talking about a drought. Oh yeah, exactly. You've got what they're saying is you've got a certain number of cows, we know roughly what they're going to produce, and so you get a baseline production, and hopefully you stick to that. Most dairy farmers have got their target they're looking for, and so we're using that as a guide. And then all you've got to do is to worry about things like power prices going up, supplementary feed prices going up. Yes, yeah. Although power prices, we've got a couple where they've been able to lock in a fixed price deal for the next 2 or 3 years with the power company. Yeah, they've been able to negotiate it. So that's another option for dairy farmers as well. You've just opened a floodgate of people who are now going to be contacting their electricity supplier. Yeah, well they should. These deals aren't on the table, widely known. But if you ask the question and say, look, I want to fix my price for the next 2 years, or I'm going to walk, they'll more often not go ahead and do something for you. So once again, you're playing with the futures game. You are, yeah. With power prices, there's almost a guarantee they're going to go up. So if you can lock it in for 2 or 3 years, then it's well worth doing so. Pretty briefly, IRD, I know they're on the side of the farmers. They are working very closely to getting farmers to trade out, aren't they? Oh yeah, they're not doing anything to put them under or anything like that. They're making sure they're doing what they can. If you can't pay your tax because you've got a cash flow problem, they're coming to the rescue and putting some schemes in place to help you spread it out over time. The key for them really is you're upfront and honest with them and tell them before you get too far in. And how often have I said it, but for God's sake, do talk to your accountant and your bank manager and get your accountant to talk to IRD. Oh, definitely, yeah. If you don't tell us, we can't do anything to help you. And we're here to help. We've got all the tools available that we can work in with your bank and the IRD and other farm advisors, whatever. We're there to sort of make sure you get ahead. My problem was about that big when IRD contacted me compared to, Yes. And it was amazing after the guy had spoken to me and he said, I want to help you through this. Yeah. I just felt about 7 feet tall. Yeah, well, they're there to be friendly. They're not as bad as what everyone thinks. Everyone talks about, they hit us with penalties and interest and that sort of thing. Yeah, they do if you don't do anything. But if you get in early enough, they do charge you interest still, but all those penalties that really add up quickly, they'll be waived or even not charged in the first place. I have got a huge amount of respect and admiration for IRD because they're not the ogre that we think they are. No, not anymore. No, not. A few years ago when they had all the controversy, that certainly changed them, and now they're even more cooperative and trying to help the taxpayer get ahead. Well, it's happened. About 50,000 sheep and about 3,000 cattle have headed off to Mexico to be used as breeding stock. It's interesting, the reaction from some of the media and some of the groups who think that they know a whole lot about animal welfare. And yes, I am editorialising, but when you get people who are suggesting that they shouldn't have spent 15 days on a boat, they should have gone over there by aircraft, you do actually start to wonder. Let's have a look at what most people who are in the industry and those who are observers think is an absolutely wonderful thing, and has saved actually a whole lot of farmers getting low prices and also those stock being put to the knife. We caught up with the exporter, first of all, at the feedlot. Here's a recap of what he said then.
There's a lot of sheep heading offshore.
Yes, 45,000 lambs that are coming to Mexico with us. We're planning to load these next week and hopefully be in Mexico around the 25th of June.
Your record for shifting sheep, Javier, is actually very good.
Yes, indeed. We had a shipment 70 years ago of similar quantity, 35,000 join ewes, and for that shipment we had a loss of 0.1 of 1%, very minimal, and that is a reflection of good health and good preparation of livestock.
I don't think many farmers could actually boast that sort of level.
Indeed. I think most livestock exporters wouldn't be able to boast that level of very, very low losses. And again, a combination of good preparation, good feed, good health, and good work between the two governments involved.
So it must be some very serious protocols from both countries.
Yes, to get this done, we have to comply with the Mexico-New Zealand agreed protocol. It's a protocol agreed between the two governments, and this implies not only certifications of New Zealand's health status, but also it implies blood testing of the ewes to make sure that they're free of certain diseases. So yes, a lot of work is done behind the scenes to make sure that we comply.
And animal welfare is paramount?
Animal welfare is paramount, and it's paramount for both countries, not only for New Zealand but also for Mexico. Government of Mexico as well as the government of New Zealand are very keen that these animals are treated in the best possible way. And from our point of view, from our company's point of view, we know that treating animals well is good business. So we're all on the same page in terms of animal welfare.
Tell me about the feed.
Well, in every case, feed is produced to standards, so we have to comply with regulations on what the feed has to have as in terms of minimum protein, minimum energy. All of that is calculated so that the animals have enough nutrition for the voyage, but also enough fibre. Very important that the feed, the pellets that we use, have sufficient fibre in them so that the rumen of the animals continues to work efficiently during the voyage.
And they're weaned onto that before they get on board?
Yes, well, we're standing here at the export preparation property. The animals come in here and are received on bailage. And then slowly introduced to pellets, so that by the time they get on the ship, they're on a 100% pellet ration and they're very used to it.
So what's going to happen when they get to their new destination?
When they get to Mexico, Northern Hemisphere, it's summer in Mexico. It's going to be a little bit warmer than today here.
That wouldn't be a bad thing.
And we discharge the ship. That takes about 3 days for us to do. And they all come to our property. We have 120 hectares of land prepared to receive these animals. They're fed on pellets, so we share the pellet formula between the feedlot here in New Zealand, the ship, and the feedlot in Mexico. They all work, even though they're manufactured in different countries, the feed has the same specifications. So we make sure that there's no digestive disruption. We then pregnancy test individually every animal. The whole 47,000 will be pregnancy tested. In this case, because the pregnancy testing season in New Zealand is on, we couldn't get a New Zealand person to come and test them, so we're going to have a Scottish man to come to Mexico and pregnancy test his ewes. And only pregnant ewes are delivered to the producers that are going to be getting these animals.
What sort of numbers?
So these producers will get between 30 and 50 sheep each, depending on how many they've been able to purchase. In Mexico, the total price of the animal is divided in three parts. The federal government provides part of the funding, the state government, where the sheep are going to, provides part of the funding, and then the producer puts in about a third. So between 30 and 50 sheep per producer. We'll be talking about 1,000 producers benefiting from this program.
So they're going to be used for breeding, hence the fact that they are pregnant?
Indeed. We used to take ewes for joining in Mexico, but we found that with the change of hemisphere, not all the ewes were able to join straight away. So by taking pregnant ewes, they lamb, and they seem to be able to get into lamb again very quickly.
So really, they've got a normal future life breeding.
Absolutely. They'll join local flocks. Lamb production is the name of the game. Generally in Mexico, lambs are sold at 42 kilos live weight into the meat trade. So these ewes will have a normal life, change of hemisphere, change of climate perhaps, but in terms of their purpose, yes, they'll have a full breeding life ahead of them.
There'd be those who would say that it'd be pretty hard to find 50,000 sheep in New Zealand at the moment.
Well, it's a big exercise, without a doubt. It's a big exercise, but the company that supplied us with the sheep here in New Zealand have done an amazing job again, because they did that 7 years ago for us. And I think this is an exercise that's not being done anywhere else in the world. It's a complex exercise. It's taken us 2 years to get to where we are today, and it's taking us 6 months here in New Zealand since we bought the first lambs. So there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes to make this a successful exercise.
The interesting thing is that everything possible is done to make sure the sheep are the best quality and very happy and animal welfare.
Indeed, and even though today is a bit wet, cold and miserable, we've been blessed with very good weather in the preparation period, so all of the sheep have taken to the feed very well, they're eating very well, and we predict a very successful voyage.
And the Ministry of Primary Industries have been very helpful.
Indeed, we had a very good meeting we have 6 Mexican veterinarians in Mexico at the moment checking the sheep. On behalf of the government, we had a very useful meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Primary Industries. And as I said at the beginning of the interview, I think our objectives are aligned. We all want a successful shipment. We want this to continue. We want to be able to come back next year and do this again.
And later in the program, we're going to be talking to Harvey again, this time though as the boats are loading.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Nicole, we've had people coming onto the program and saying because of stress and because of depression, etc., 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 that farmers need to get off the farm and have a break. A lot of them, as in the farmers, are saying, I can't afford to go. Yeah. You will suggest that they can't afford not to.
I completely agree with that, Rob. I believe that, it's hard to consider taking a holiday when you are in a tough time. But I do think that holidays offer a few things. Something to look forward to, especially when times are tough. It sort of gives you a light at the end of the tunnel. It gives you a chance to recharge, because when you're stressed, when you're exhausted, your decision making isn't as strong, and you tend not to be as rational all the time with what you're thinking about. And also, it's a chance to recharge with your family, to reconnect and actually spend time with your wife, with your kids, with your husband, and actually get away from the stress, get that weight off your shoulders.
I've been there, and I understand that you've been there.
Yes, most definitely. Being in the travel industry can actually be quite a stressful job. And I've been there where I said, I don't have time, I can't afford to, and it really did me in. And only at a point when my doctor finally said, you need to take a week off, have a break, get some perspective. And I did that, and I tell you, it really, brought me back, and I was able to get back to work and work better, work harder, in a different way. More efficiently, of course. Because when you're stressed, when you're exhausted, when you're worrying constantly, it is so hard to, no matter how passionate you are about what you do, it is so hard to get up and do that every day.
And you don't see the wood for the trees.
Of course, you know, and like I said, you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. You don't have anything to look forward to, and you're constantly thinking about the negatives.
Let's look at some of the destinations, because you are in the travel industry.
Yeah.
And most people would instantly think that it's going to cost you thousands, but hasn't necessarily.
It doesn't have to. I mean, the sky's the limit with travel, and our job at World Travelers, of course, is to make a holiday that suits the family. If someone comes to me and says, look, we don't want to spend a fortune, we just want to get away for, you know, a few nights or 5 nights, just someplace maybe warm, where we can either chill on the beach or spend time doing things as a group, you know, we can make that happen. We pride ourselves on listening to people and actually taking into account what they're going through, and then tailor making something for them. Even just this morning before I came here, I thought it would be really valuable for me to just have a look. If someone was to call me up today and say, Nicole, I really want to go on a break, I don't care where it is, I want it to be warm, something I can do with the family, and I just priced up a really basic holiday to the Gold Coast. Return airfares, 7 nights accommodation in a 2-bedroom, 4-star apartment, car hire, a 3-day pass to go to theme parks, and insurance, and it was coming in at $3,500. And that's for a family of 4.
So that's 4 people?
2 adults and 2 children under 12. And you know, when you kind of think about the cost of that $3,500, you know, in the grand scheme of life, in the grand scheme of what they're going through, what people who need a holiday are going through, that's really a drop in the bucket. And it sort of becomes a case of, I can't afford to, but can you afford not to, you know? And it doesn't always have to be an international holiday. It could be something, find a really nice holiday home somewhere in the North Island where the weather might be a bit more, you know, temperate, and something like that. So there's a lot of options out there.
I don't think, Nicole, there would be a banker in New Zealand who wouldn't forward $3,500.
Well, especially to someone who's obviously working so hard. You know, the situation with the farming industry is not a secret to the citizens of this country. Everyone knows what's going on. Everyone feels for them. Everyone understands where they're coming from, you know? And at the end of the day, the farming industry is such a big part of this country. We need to be looking after them as much as they're looking after us in what they're doing. You know, and I don't want to sit here and go on and on about, you know, finance and that sort of stuff, but we have, you know, we have interest-free, 12-month interest-free options available.
I want you, incidentally, I want you to carry on.
Well, we have 12-month interest-free options year-round. So if someone comes in and they go, look, I don't want to get a big loan that's going to be 20%. I don't want to use a credit card that's going to be 18%. What can you offer me? Well, we have an option for interest-free for 12 months. And so, again, if you actually look at that, that's an alternative that people can use. And that's an alternative that allows us to make that holiday a reality and to make that break with the family, you know, an option for them. Because I know that my situation was really difficult, and, you know, I was pretty comfortable still. I can't imagine what these folks must be going through. And I just want to stress so much that we understand, we want to be there to help as much as we can.
So you really are a safety net, which is good.
Well, that's a really lovely thing to say, actually. I've never looked at it that way, but I can tell you that the best time for me is when a client comes back from a holiday and they say, man, we needed that, and we're so grateful. We're so grateful that you were able to put that together for us. And like I said, if someone wants to go and lie on a beach for a week, we can make it happen. If they go, you know what, we're going to be bored, we can make other things happen. Sky's the limit.
I don't think I'd be bored lying on a beach, quite frankly, but even that was, because it's interesting that your doctor told you, not advised you. My doctor told me.
Yeah,
Boof,
yeah.
Get out of here,
yeah.
Collins.
I had to have a week off. It was, yeah, she wrote me like a note and all that. And, you know, it's not to say that it was, you know, anyone's fault or anything. It was just circumstances at the time. And just like what they're going through, it's circumstances of this time and what's happening with things that are outside of their control. And I think it's really important that people keep a bit of perspective in all of this, because, you know, it does often seem like when things are bad, they're never going to get better. And there won't be, like I said, that light at the end of the tunnel. But this will pass, and you need to look after yourself during the bad times so that you are still around for the good times.
Having been there, it's interesting, because I like to say that I have been there, because people then sort of go, you poor devil. But I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying this is the reality.
Exactly.
Is that, yes, you do come back
Yep.
absolutely charged, and you look at things totally differently.
Yep. You come back with a stronger sort of motivation, and sort of almost like you're a bit more fortified. You know, you're ready. The weight has slightly been lifted, and you're ready to face the new challenges that are ahead of you. You're ready to, you know, continue the fight, whatever you're doing, and it puts you in a better stead to do those things. And that break, like I said, it doesn't even have to be some amazing exotic location. It can literally be something as simple as Australia, as simple as a holiday home up in the Bay of Islands. You know, there's options out there for people.
The interesting thing, of course, is your timing is beautiful, because the carving starts sort of late July, early August.
Right.
So it is time for people. How much lead time do you need to get the bookings in?
Well, like I said, I mean, obviously when it comes to booking holidays, it's always a better idea to look at something further in advance. You know, if someone were to come to us and say, right, we're involved in the farming industry, we want to go on holiday sometime during these months, and they come to us, you know, 8 or 9 months out, of course we're going to have more choices. But like I said, this morning when I looked up an option, it was for about 6 weeks from now. And that was just one example. If someone was desperate, I could get them out tomorrow.
And anticipation is half the delight, of course.
Well, exactly. It's having something to look forward to and going, what are we doing all this for? You know, why are we doing what we're doing? Are we doing it just to get up and do the same thing again and again every day? Or are we doing it to create a life for ourselves with our families and to have memories made?
And very briefly, here's your advertisement. You're the personal touch rather than trying to do it on your own through the internet.
Yeah, I mean, look, I completely understand there's people out there who love to do it on their own, and there's nothing wrong with that. They like to sit there and plan. I've done that myself, and I do spend hours, you know, doing that. But part of what we do is we have access to literally everything you could think of. We know how to get the best airfares. We know how to handle problems. A big issue right now at this time of year is people not being able to fly out of Christchurch due to weather. I've already had a few this year due to ice, and a few years ago in that big snowstorm, I had heaps of clients who could not get out to get to their holiday. And, you know, there's lines a mile long at the airport. People are waiting in line. Our clients call us up. We go, right, we've got you on the next available flight. We sorted out accommodation in Auckland. You'll be on your holiday in 24 hours.
Nicole, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rob.
In just a moment, we'll be back talking about the add-ons you can get from what you think could have been waste.
Charles, it is said that we waste a lot of our food in the world.
We do. It's horrendous the amount of wastage that can be accounted for in the food systems. I'm in a couple of EU projects, so where we've got partners from the European Union, partners from America, partners from China, and we're working in partnership with them in a collaborative research environment. And one of the projects, for instance, suggests that we waste as much as 60 or 70% of our food items that we buy. Now, obviously it will depend on the type of food items that we are using. So things like salad leaves or fresh produce are very highly perishable. So one of the thrusts is to look at how we can minimize that wastage in the food industry and the supply chain in terms of distribution, but also how we can optimize the utilization of those waste streams. In the food industry, we waste a lot of water, we waste a lot of byproducts. So if we think about brewing, for instance, we make beer out of grains, we make beer out of hops, but most of the beer that we drink is water. 97% or 95% of a beer is water. The rest of the ingredients is used as waste products in the feed and animal food industry. One of the projects that we're looking at is how we can utilize that spent brewer's grains into more nutritious food for human consumption. And that could be done through extrusion technology, that could be done through bread making or other types of cereal manufacturing processes. So we can make breakfast cereals, for instance, out of these type of ingredients. And these are healthy breakfast cereals, not coated in sugar so that they're going to give you a high glycemic response all the time, but they're going to be nutritious in the form of added fibre and added vitamins and added bioactive ingredients. And that's one way that we can try to use the waste that we produce in the food industry to our advantage as consumers and the world.
And you're doing a whole lot of work with China.
We are working with China. We're working with China on a number of avenues. So one of the avenues in terms of novel processing technologies for the food industry. The other area is looking at food safety and food regulation and how we can try to harmonise regulations between China and New Zealand.
So how's that going?
It's going quite well. In terms of, as you can appreciate, China is now our biggest trading partner in food and in most of our tradable goods. So they import around about 45% of our exports in the food area. So we have to be aware of their requirements, both from a legal point of view and also from a consumer's point of view. They have different tastes, they have different perceptions of quality, they have different requirements in terms of portion size or in terms of labelling. So we have to try to integrate that as much as we can. And we've got several projects running with universities and research establishments that underline that work. For instance, one of the areas in which we're collaborating very strongly is in that food safety and food security and green processing technology. And we have a joint research centre between Lincoln University and South China University of Technology, where I'm going to go in 2 weeks' time to do some guest lecturing. I'm a visiting professor there as well. And we have staff members coming over here to teach our students and engage in research, and we have staff members from Lincoln University going there and being embedded in the culture of China, which is always fascinating.
Charles, that sounds dangerously close to actually listening to the end user.
Well, we have to. If we don't listen to the end user, then we make something that is not fit for purpose. And we all know what quality is. Quality is fitness for purpose, whatever that purpose is.
In just a moment or two, we'll be talking to John Wally about things economic.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure. Manufactured from healthy deep-sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active Amino Acid Biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
John, the Auckland housing situation.
Well, it's New Zealand housing, full on, and we can see an awful lot throwing through the media right now. The structural issue is that New Zealand house prices are actually going through the roof in the long run. You can see from the graphic that New Zealand is probably the worst in the world in terms of the OECD numbers that were recently published in the Herald. And you can see that the black line at the top there is New Zealand, and you can see how things have moved. If you think back to 1990, we didn't have much of a conversation around unaffordable house prices. House prices were house prices, and we didn't like paying the money, but we just got on with it. But right now, this entry into the market for first-time buyers is extremely difficult.
The green line, which is Australia.
Australia's in much the same sort of boat, but New Zealand's like the best of the worst of the two. You know, never feel useless. You can always be a bad example. But I mean, New Zealand it's basically showing that we have a significant distortion around housing, and addressing that politically is tough. The discussions that we're seeing all the time shows just how difficult it is. But the problem with house prices is what it does in terms of feeding back into the rest of the economy.
Is this partly because of we became an interest-based economy?
Well, we've become a financialized economy, like most of the English-speaking world. We've played with assets, and we'll talk about dairy payouts in a moment. But even land has got into that same treadmill where we pay more for land, so we have to earn more off the land. And if we pay too much and things go backwards, we come under a lot of pressure.
Looking at the graph again, I mean, the blue line, which is the United States, 2001, we were all about the same.
Yep, and it's this issue of the favoured treatment of housing and assets in terms of the financial system. If I've got a business that's turning over $4 million with no assets, if I've got a business turning over $1 million with $4 or $5 million worth of assets, I can borrow on the second, but I can't borrow on the first.
What should we be not buying houses? I remember when Winston Peters said you can't heat a house if you buy one.
Well, we should be buying houses, but we should be thinking of what is it that's driving the same house being double the price in 4 or 5 years. Why is it that that happens? And that's really the ability of the financial system to pump debt into that part of the economy.
Is there an answer?
There is an answer. The answer sits of moving a lot of the policy framework that rebalances the economy. So I know it's unpopular, capital gains tax.
Yeah,
I know
you've
it's
been pushing that one
unpopular,
for a while.
Prudential ratios which say, I mean, back in the day when I were a boy, when I bought my first house, the amount of money I could borrow was strictly limited to my income. We've allowed all that to slip away now. We've allowed the ability to buy an asset as a function of how much the banks are willing to lend against it. And that's probably not good from the point of view of financial stability.
I need to congratulate you because you said however many months ago, was it 6 months ago, that they would be cutting the interest rates, and you were bang on.
By the skin of my teeth. I said
But
by June we would have to cut the OCR. I saw the economy as weaker. The bank has cut the OCR now. There will be another cut in my view because we've seen the fall off in the dairy payout. We've seen general weakness across the global economy, and the currency was unsustainably high, as the bank kept saying, but now frankly they've done something about it.
So that will come back, so we're likely to be becoming less attractive for people from overseas pouring thousands and millions of dollars in?
Well, that's the problem with the housing market. If the housing market is sucking in investment from offshore, if the housing market is inflating very quickly, we can't easily cut the OCR, because if we do, we fuel the housing market. If we don't cut the OCR, we have a problem with exchange rates. So we've got a dilemma that we sit in the middle of. That requires the bank to move in the macroprudential areas, which are like the LVRs or income to loan ratios or some other controls in terms of how much or how often the banks can lend against those assets. That is a real requirement in terms of delivering financial stability, because if we did have a housing market setback, shock, crash, whichever word you use, it would be very damaging for the broader economy.
Is it likely?
Probably not likely. There's too many people focused on stopping it from happening, but that doesn't mean that we don't have that ongoing impact. Remember, the dollar's trading under 70 cents now. First, I think, a five-year low, which is really helping our exporters, and to some extent will help the dairy payout, because the returns from export dairy produce will be better because the exchange rate is somewhat lower.
They're talking about $7 billion lost to the economy because of the dairy price. I mean, that's huge.
It's a major impact in New Zealand, but we need to deal with the deeper seated structural reasons for that, and that sits around the financial policy.
And 45% of the farmers are predicted to not make ends meet.
That's the problem with the readiness of farmers to pay too much for dairy land. It's a business model which says we'll actually run on the smell of an oily rag, we will just about service the debt, and we'll make the real money. No, we will make the real money when we sell the farm in 20 years' time. That's the problem of an asset-based business model.
Is that likely to mean that the prices are likely to come down?
I think if the payout continues to fall or stay low, then surely the price of the asset should change to accommodate that.
Because the banks will drive that, won't they? They won't say yes to mortgages.
That's essentially, there'll be less investment funded by debt going into that sector.
Because that's frightening. What's happening in Europe?
Well, Europe, the big story is Greece and the ongoing shuffling to the exit of the Greece economy from the euro. Latest news today is that the talks have broken down and each side is blaming the other, standard practice. And we'll see. I actually believe they'll find a solution. I think not finding a solution is probably territory nobody wants to get into. But neither side is talking to the other and blaming the other side. Yeah. This is the standard public negotiation process.
And then, of course, there's the Trans-Pacific
Partnership.
That's
and
right.
so Obama was looking for a continuation of the fast track. The Democratic Party said no, we don't think there's enough protection for our American workers. And Obama is struggling to see that through now, and it really is apparently the case that the TPP is under terminal discussions right now.
So, yeah, right. So what's that? Is that likely to hit us, or is it just a lost opportunity?
Well, the argument is that gains to trade. So if we free up trade, we see more exports out of New Zealand, we see freer trade, we see lower cost trade, and that adds to the economic activity in the trade bloc. There is a claim that there's a significant gain for New Zealand, but on the other side there's that worry of Pharmac and what might be done to reduce the effectiveness of Pharmac and what might happen around copyright and intellectual property.
So to be oversimplification, it's a case of I bought a lottery ticket but I didn't win it.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I would hope that we see something out of the TPP, but there is that problem of New Zealand would like to see free trade in agriculture, Japan wouldn't like that, if you like, and the US wouldn't like that. The US would like full control of intellectual property, including pharma, and Pharmac wouldn't like that. So there's this standard tension that goes on inside all negotiations.
As always, it's terribly, terribly complicated, but thank you for unravelling it. Now we're talking about sheep shipments. Let's catch up again with Javier, this time as the sheep were loading. Javier, very large ship in Timaru port and it's heading to Mexico.
Indeed, yes. We're leaving tomorrow morning for Mexico, hopefully with 3,200 cattle on and about 45,000 sheep for breeding.
Now obviously there's been a lot of precautions and care and loving attention to them already. What happens on board ship?
Well, once they get penned into their respective areas, they'll receive feed and water, or in fact feed and water will be there when they come on board, and they'll just settle into a routine that will last 15 days, which is basically eating, drinking and sleeping. There's not much else to do on board.
But it's not a bad sort of a life for a cattle beast or a sheep.
It is indeed. It's not bad. They'll do well. They'll get out of the cold. It'll be warm on the ship, and whilst all of that is happening, we'll rush over to Mexico to get
welcome them.
Everything ready to welcome them. Yes.
So tell me about the people on board. There's a veterinarian and such?
Yes, we have, apart from the standard crew that look after the livestock, we have 3 accredited stockmen, accredited by the New Zealand government, and a veterinarian travelling with the animals. So all their needs are taken care of, and should there be any need to look after any specific animals, there's trained people on board to do that.
And is the medicine cabinet?
Yes, indeed. It's quite a large medicine cabinet, so we take precautions and we take medicines for all eventualities.
So how do you get to feed them? Because there's a lot of different pens up there.
Yes, the feed is in bulk, is pellets, and so we load that in the tanks at the bottom of the ship. That's elevated to tanks on the top of the ship, and then it falls by gravity to each feed trough. So it's an automatic feeding system. The water is automatic as well. So there's not too many things that can go wrong there.
And I guess 15 days is not going to be a problem for manure and such?
No, in the case of cattle we wash every 3 days and replace that manure with sawdust. And in the case of sheep, because the manure is more solid, then that remains in the pens, and that gives them a solid footing and a bedding to lie on.
So 15 days, and at the other end, they are treated again with love and care.
Yes, they'll be discharged at the other end in warmer conditions than today.
You Mexicans could feel that.
Yes, they'll go to our farm. We have 120 hectares in Mexico. We'll keep the sheep for a few days while we do pregnancy tests on them, and then start delivering those animals to the producers that are participating in this program.
And any that aren't pregnant will go to a ram over there?
They'll stay at the farm until they either show pregnant, because they may be pregnant but they may not be showing at the time that we scan them, so we'll give them a second chance. And then they'll be with rams, so that anything that's not pregnant will be joined in Mexico.
And there's been a lot of work going into this. You guys have been working on it for quite some time.
We started 6 months ago, procuring these lambs in New Zealand, putting them away in 61 properties, putting the rams in with them, vaccinating them, drenching them, shearing them, ear tagging them, or they all have electronic tags, so traceability will be absolute from the property of origin in New Zealand to the property of destination in Mexico.
And they almost become family pets over there, Harvey, don't they?
Yes, there'll be about 1,000 producers participating in this program in Mexico, so the New Zealand impact in Mexico will be large, and it has been large over the years. It's been a very successful exercise taking animals for breeding from New Zealand to Mexico.
And those who were involved need to be congratulated. Peter Walsh, who managed to put the whole thing together, along with Arthur Blakely, and of course the people in Mexico, the public servants who made it all happen and made sure that everything was done. Be very, very proud. After the break, I'm talking with Brent Rawstron about all sorts of things, including exporting.
Be Active begins here in the cold, clean, unpolluted southern oceans of New Zealand. Be Active amino acid biostimulant, natural, 100% pure, manufactured from healthy deep sea fish from sustainable New Zealand fisheries. New Zealand's Be Active amino acid biostimulant, the way the world is growing. Working with nature, good for the plant, good for the planet. Now that's growing for good.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
I think it's all working well, Jack.
My thoughts exactly.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
This is exactly what you need.
I think that'll do the trick.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
It's all looking good. Did you bring the sauce? I can't think of everything.
We'll get you thinking, think water.
For real ideas and real solutions, just think water.
Brent, great news. The dollar's down around 70.
Fantastic, considering where it was this time last year. What were we, mid to high 8s, 86 to 88, I think it peaked at, somewhere about 12, 15 months ago. Now down to 70, with more force to come. Because it all really balances on that gap between the US dollar exchange rate, OCR rate, and the New Zealand OCR rate. We're at 3.5, we're just way too high. I think they were a little bit quick at putting it up, and certainly have been 4 months late in bringing it back down again. I think they were trying to say, oh, we didn't want to appear we've made a mistake, but the world moved on. Oil prices dropped dramatically. Fonterra all of a sudden hit a wall with their dairy products, dairy exports. New Zealand's a different place to what it was 6, 9 months ago.
Well, they've got to keep a travelling watch on it, don't they?
Yeah, and really their brief is not housing, to control housing. Their brief is to keep the inflation rate between 1.5% and 2%, 1 and 3%, and they were way out of that range. And they were just trying to say, oh no, but we're worried about inflation might happen in the future. Yeah, well, it's been pretty slow at coming. So anyway, they've done what we hoped they would do, and I think there's another one coming. I think they'll drop another 0.25%, probably in July. Then I think it'll hold. I think we'll sit at 3% and just wait then ready for what America does. So long as America continues their economy to strengthen, then the differential between us and the US dollar will be smaller, and that'll encourage more money to be invested in the United States rather than trying to find a home in New Zealand. So that's really what it's all about.
Exporters such as yourself, I mean, it's got to be good news if interest rates are coming down, the dollar's coming down.
Fantastic. I did a little bit of an exercise before coming on the show about the whole milk powder price at say $2,500 a tonne, if that's what the price was. Now, if that had been the price last year, when it was 86 to 88, then it returned in New Zealand dollars $2,900 a tonne in New Zealand dollars. At 0.70, that's $3,600. So that's the differential it makes in terms of the same price, 2,500 USD. Makes over $600-700 a tonne more that the farmer has to be distributed to the farmers here. Same with the wine industry. Anyone who's exporting, we were really burning up in the 80s. 70 historically is still very high, but we think it's Christmas to what it was 12 months ago. And I think we are heading to the Goldilocks figure, neither too high nor too low at about 62. I think we will get there, another cut. A little bit of strengthening in the USD, which is probably more important. We could well be heading towards that low 60s by early next year.
That opens the door for people marketing.
Oh, fantastically so. Fantastically so. But for two things, it does certainly for marketing, anything that's selling overseas, but any inbound tourism. All of a sudden, inbound tourism is a lot cheaper. And so that's just going to make the tourism industry in New Zealand really fine. And we are hot property to come to anyway. The Americans know New Zealand. The cheaper, the better dollar they've got when they come to here, the happier they'll be to consider flying to New Zealand. The only opposition that Americans show to coming to New Zealand is not because they haven't heard about the place, they haven't appreciated our beauty. They've got that from Peter Jackson's films. It's the flight. You know, oh, we're going to be on a plane for 12 hours or 13 hours. Is that how long it takes you to get here? That's right. I said, well, we always just say, well, look, just think about it. You get on the plane, you have a meal, you have a sleep, you wake up, you have another meal, and you get off. That's it. You're there. And so, when that gets over, but the point I'm really trying to make is that as the New Zealand dollar weakens, inbound tourism and tourism sector in New Zealand, hospitality will increase. So there's lots and lots and lots of very positive things apart from the exporters.
Serious question. I mean, we've had a brilliant weekend, motor racing wise. Does that help New Zealand?
Oh, in terms of putting us on the map, most certainly it does. I thought it was fascinating at the end of Rally Italy, where Hayden Padden, our Geraldine driver, did so well, finishing second. They didn't have a New Zealand flag. So they had to jump and they had to race into the crowd and grab one of John Key's preferences, one, the black with the silver fern on it, for Hayden and John to wave on the finishing ramp, because that was their surrogate New Zealand flag to race. And so all of a sudden there are people saying, oh, this New Zealander's doing well. It just all of a sudden raises the awareness of it. It's only ever awareness. Sponsorship of motorsport very much is awareness. Awareness of a product, whether it be Martini, whatever it may be. It's an awareness advertising. And the same with, on the world scene, on World Champions, Le Mans or WRC or Formula One or whatever, if the driver is from a certain country, it is certainly giving profile to that country. There is no doubt about that at all.
Because we got two people onto the podium at the Le Mans.
First and second, 49 years ago, Chris Amon and Bruce McLaren in #1 car, and Denny Holman, I can't remember who his partner was, in the #2 car for Ford. Very nearly the same sort of scenario. This time we only had a New Zealand driver in each of the cars, but it was still a fantastic result. And then obviously in the Isle of Man TT, that Bruce Anstey is just age of about 93 and a bit. Well, that's what he looks like, but he's just doing phenomenal things.
Well, he's in his late 40s though.
On what is a phenomenal circuit. But Hayden's success at Rally Italy on roads that really were pretty dodgy, certainly not his style of race, some of the ones he favours, which is very much faster than that. And he is the only one still running last year's generation car. Everyone else is on upgraded upgraded cars for this year.
And I've got to sit there now and say, well, we're a bit embarrassed that you're #3. We want you to give you this year's car.
The contract is to be the #3 driver. They've got Thierry Neuville as their #1 driver, Danny Sordo as #2 driver, and that's the way the contract is. But I think his currency has suddenly improved hugely, and it's not just because he was winning the rally, it's not because he was winning stages, it's because how they run WRC these days, they do 3 or 4 stages in the morning, go back for service, then they do the same stages in the afternoon. And there's no doubt the way also it's run in Formula One, sorry, in WRC with Ogier have to sweep the road, which is a very difficult job. By the time you get back the second time round, the road sweeping has disappeared. But Hayden was still able to beat the VWs in the afternoon, and that's the benchmark. It wasn't just because of his road position in the morning he was quick. When they went back again, he was also quick, and that's what the team managers will be looking at. Be it Toyota, who are yet to enter the championship coming in next year, Hyundai themselves, other manufacturers. How hot a prop is he going to become? His first win's only is coming. There's no doubt about that.
Brent, thank you very much indeed. Exciting times for everybody. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed On the Land, but I will be back at the same time next week, hopefully with a clearer voice. In the meantime, bye now.